Shalom, 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 shalom. This is your messianic pastor, prophet, and priest coming to you once again today. It is my hope and wish that today's podcast will bless your life in more ways than one. Today I'm going to be looking at the entire book of Ezra the prophet, based on the visions that I received last night from God. God of Abraham, Chukwu Abiyama. I wanted to excavate and examine some of the intrigues and the dynamics that occurred during the period that the Jews who were exiled into Babylon were allowed to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, and these Jews returned in two batches. The first batch was led by a gentleman known as Sheikh Bazar, and then has also been referred to at other times as Zerubbabel. And then the second batch was that returned, where the Igbo Jews, were actively involved in that return. That batch was, led by Ezra, and I'm gonna look at the two events, but related events, separately. Of course, the last time that I was on this platform, I kind of excavated and explored the problems of the Lemba Jews of South Africa. You all know that the Lemba Jews have undergone DNA genome investigation, which in science has been referred to as the Cohen model haplotype. It was a molecular DNA investigation targeting the idea that a particular segment of the Lemba tribe called the Buba has within it members of the priestly class. The priestly class from the lineage of Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was the priest himself. And that that DNA testing was conducted by a South African geneticist. I believe there was a second DNA just to corroborate the outcome of the first DNA test. Why do I keep calling it DNA testing by the South African geneticist, and there was a match. There was indeed a strong link that the Buba of the Lemba tribe were members of the Levitical lineage. So I did raise some issues regarding why those priests and prophets and scribes are still left in the diaspora. They should have been repatriated long before now. And I'm still expecting people to, make comments on these videos. Even though I started these videos, I've not been receiving a lot of comments. Go to my thread. Go into my channel. Make comments. I don't care. It doesn't bother me whether the comment is, negative or not too palatable. But today I'm going to be, discussing the return of the exiles. Because the last video, that dealt with the Lemba tribe is inextricably intertwined with this particular video I'm going to make today about the return of the exiles, which can be found in many books of the Old Testament, but particularly in the book of Ezra, because he played a pivotal role in the return and in propagating the laws of Moses and other Jewish statutes to keep the Jews that returned in line so that they don't fall into the same pitfall that first led them into captivity. So after King Artaxerxes of Persia, paved the way for the first batch led by Sheshbazzar or Zerubbabel to return to Jerusalem to start rebuilding the wall. They were also in the company of other prophets, priests, and scribes like Haggai, Zechariah, and Prophet Joshua. They were amongst the high-profile priests that accompanied the first group of exiles that returned to Jerusalem after 70 years of exile in Babylon. And the main purpose was for them to go and rebuild and restore the temple. And then they first started to design the blueprint for the rebuilding of the temple. And according to Flavius Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, the temple was to be rebuilt on the same plot of real estate upon which the temple that was destroyed was built. So they didn't have any problem in going to acquire land. The land was already there. It was just to clear the debris and the trash, and then the new temple will begin to be rebuilt. But they first of all started building an altar on the grounds of the temple. And this is very, very instructive, because it was important for them to have a platform upon which to give thanks and make animal sacrifice to God of Abraham, Chukwuabiam, because God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is a jealous God. He will not be ignored or relegated to the background while a project of this magnitude was taking place. So they built an altar upon which to give him glory and worship him after the main project began to take shape. But something happened along the way, that kind of caused an arrested development on the temple project, because some of their adversaries, some of the Jewish adversaries and enemies, particularly the Samaritans, began to subject the builders to aggressive and potentially annoying behavior, to the extent that there was a lot of distraction. They were complaining to the king, King Darius, that the Jews have started to rebuild the temple that had already been destroyed. But King Darius, after some research, reauthorizes the Jews to continue work on the temple project in line with the earlier decree issued, earlier profound proclamation issued by Cyrus, King of Persia, earlier, before they started making their way back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. So work started in the temple project, and it was rebuilt, and it was dedicated to the jubilation and the excitement of the Jews, as well as their Gentile neighbors, including the proponents and supporters of rebuilding the temple. Keep in mind that the people who spearheaded the rebuilding of this temple were not even Jews. They were Gentile. They were Gentile kings. But God touched them in a special way to support the Jews, to provide resources, provide funding, provide manpower for the rebuilding of the house of God. Now, after that, the second wave of Jewish exiles started to return under the guidance and guardianship of Ezra the prophet. And it was during this period that the Igbo Jews, started returning from Babylon to Jerusalem. And the reason why they didn't join the first wave of returnees was simple, because they had enormous investment along the Kiba River, where they built their businesses, had real estate investments, and they couldn't just leave precipitously. They needed to spend time articulating ways to profitably liquidate their assets, because they needed to have money in order to return to their fatherland in Israel. So they had to find buyers for their houses, for their businesses, and then when they took care of that, they joined Ezra. And now I think the second reason why they joined Ezra was because Ezra had already earned an illustrious reputation as a man who was very versatile with the laws of Moses and other Jewish laws. And the Igbo Jews needed to be under the leadership of a man who is already reputable for interpreting the laws of the Jewish laws, so that they don't make the same mistake that Jews who were already living in Jerusalem made, that caused God to become so angry that the temple was destroyed, and a lot of Jews, he set the sword using Nebuchadnezzar's forces against the Jews, and those who were lucky to escape were shipped and deported into exile. So a lesson was learned. So they needed to make sure that they were part of the Reformation. They were part of the rejuvenation. They were part of a new Jewish community. And then thirdly, the first batch of Jews that returned to Jerusalem had a problem because of poor leadership. They were making the same mistake that their forefathers made before the fall of the temple. Because when they returned to Jerusalem, they started to cavort. They started to mingle and intermarry with Gentile women, women who were described as polytheists. That means they worshipped multiple gods. They worshipped, fetish, deity, false and idol gods, and they transferred this to their Jewish husbands. And keep in mind that the reason why the first temple was destroyed and Jews taken into captivity was because they were disobedient and they gave into idolatry. So it was strategic for the Igbo Jews not to follow the first Jewish, the first wave of returnees, because they knew something wasn't right about the leadership. Zerubbabel was not a household name, and he had not proven himself in any arena, so he didn't have a track record that people can look up to and form a balanced judgment over whether or not he was supposed to be a reliable leader. So that's, Igbos are very, very strategic. They're always thinking ahead of the others. That's why they decided to, follow Ezra, the renowned, reputable scholar who eventually led them into Jerusalem. The Jews that were caught in intertribal marriage with Gentile women were asked to atone for their sins, and they were forgiven under the leadership of Ezra. So it was a very, very important period of renaissance for Jews who were returning from exile after approximately 70 years in Babylonian captivity. And the text, extant text didn't, indicate that they had a rough time in Babylon. For the simple fact that they were, allowed to reside along a river. Shows that, the hand of God was resting on their lives, and built, they built thriving businesses. They were involved in commerce, they were involved in entrepreneurship, and they, had very cordial relationship with the Babylonians, and they were not treated like slaves or treated like aliens. They were part and parcel of the existing population of Babylonians and other communities. So why God gave me the vision for this podcast, because it's important to recognize the tremendous significance of priests, prophets, and scribes. If you don't if people don't align themselves with their experience and their knowledge, they are bound to make all sorts of avoidable mistakes. So as you can see, the second wave of returnees didn't have any scandal at all, because they were being guided by somebody, by a priest who's who had the covering of God over and around his life. I'm talking about Ezra, and the first batch wished they could say the same. They made all sorts of mistakes. There was nobody to guide them. Until I come your way again, I want you to keep to remain blessed in the name of Elohim Yahweh. This is your messianic pastor, priest, and prophet, bringing you word from God as the heavens open up. Until I come your way again, shalom, shalom.